Morning, everyone. If you want to turn, if you have your Bible or phone, it's Matthew 7, if you'd like to follow. And Steve has actually chosen the Good News translation, but you can still follow it in your chosen version. Okay, so Matthew 7, and it'll be 1 to 12. Do not judge others, so that God will not judge you. For God will judge you in the same way you judge others, and he will apply to you the same rules you apply to others. Why then do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the log in your own? How dare you say to your brother, "Please, let me take that speck out of your eye," when you have a log in your own? You hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye, then you will be able to see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to dogs. They will only turn and attack you. Do not throw your pearls in front of pigs. They will only trample them underfoot. Ask, and you will receive. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks will receive, and anyone who seeks will find, and the door will be opened to those who knock. Would any of you who are fathers give your son a stone when he asks for bread? Or would you give a snake when he asks for a fish? As bad as you are, you know how to give good things to your children. How much more then will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Do for others what you want them to do for you. This is the meaning of the law of Moses and of the teachings of the prophets. Amen.
Good morning, everybody. Look, I'd just like to add my welcome statements to the people who spoke earlier, especially if you're here for the first time or you're here for the first time in a long time, or especially if you're not even sure you should have turned up. But you're out exploring and asking questions and thinking things through and gathering your own information. Good on you for being open-minded enough to do that. If you're looking for the perfect church, I think I can save you a bit of time. It's not here. And if you find a perfect church, don't go there, exactly. Unless you're perfect yourself, you'll muck it up for them. But we try hard here. We want to be better followers of Jesus. So I'd like to also acknowledge my Connect group who just over a week ago for our meeting, I said, look, instead of what we were going to do, can we do my section of the Sermon on the Mount so that I can get all your wisdom? So anything wise that you hear today didn't come from me. It came from my very wise Connect group. If you're looking for a church that will put you to sleep on a Sunday morning, mostly we can't offer that, but this morning we can, okay? So that's just for the Livingston family. So the Sermon on the Mount is only 3 chapters in the book of Matthew, which is the first of the 4 books that concentrate on Jesus' life. Just Matthew chapter 5, 6 and 7. Some of it's repeated in Luke. You can read the whole thing in 15 minutes slowly, but it's absolutely packed. So from mid-June till next week, we've been looking at the Sermon on the Mount. And even if you know a little bit of Christianity, you might recognise some of these statements. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. Seek first the kingdom of God. Consider the lilies of the field. Our Father who art in heaven, and the rest of the Lord's Prayer. Enter by the narrow gate. No one can serve 2 masters. You cannot love God and money. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will have enough worries of its own. They all come from that very rich 3 chapters only, all of those statements that I just read out. I find some of the statements and teachings in the Sermon on the Mount really easy to understand. They're very clear, very straightforward. I think you could read them out to a 5-year-old and they would go, yep, I know what that means. How to live, what to do in here, what to do in here, what to do in here, what to do with this and this. Very clear instructions. Other statements I find a bit harder, a bit more, what's that mean? And there's a couple that I think, boy, where did that come from? What does that mean? Cryptic, I would call them. Some of the teachings in the Sermon on the Mount are completely surprising and kind of, if you didn't know Jesus, you would say stupid. Like when Andrew taught us about the Beatitudes, you know. Blessed are you when people persecute you and utter all sorts of evil things and lie about you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad. That's a quote. That's Jesus talking. That sounds ridiculous. If you didn't know the rest of what Jesus was on about, you would just write that off as this guy needs his tablets. We've had 2 major interruptions to our series since mid-June, and they've both been great. So one of them was a couple of weeks ago when we celebrated 100 years of this church and looked back and thanked God for all the things that happened and looked in awe, at least I did in my mind, at people 100 years ago who could put a church together without the aid of text messages, emails, the internet, mobile phones. And in fact, 100 years ago in Newcastle, even a phone on the wall was pretty uncommon. But they did. They persisted. And here we are 100 years later, reaping the benefits of their efforts. The other interruption we had was when we heard from Daphne Skinner about her being sent from this church in 1961 to India to work in some homes there. I walked out of that service thinking, I think I have just been in the live audience of one of the best podcasts you'll ever hear in your life. And I hope that was number 1 of 12. It was fantastic, and it is on the church's YouTube page there. If you missed it, it's definitely worth following up. And all of the Sermon on the Mount talks are also available still if you want to catch up on something or have another listen. One of the themes that keep coming back in the Sermon on the Mount, and Grant in particular mentioned it last week, is the theme of motivation. He said, as I read these things, and last week we were talking about being anxious about what you wear and anxious about what you eat and anxious will you be fed and that kind of stuff. He said, these statements and other ones in the Sermon on the Mount make me think about motivation. And when Nathan spoke about praying and giving and fasting, a lot of that was also about motivation. So don't pray in such a way, that you're showing off to other people. Don't give in such a way that you're showing off how generous you are. Don't fast in such a way that, you're looking for pity and you're looking for someone to look up to you. Do these things in secret, where God, who knows everything that happens in secret. So the motivation for praying and giving and fasting, the motivation for buying clothes and getting fed and stuff is important. Sometimes motivation's actually more important than what actually is done. Does that sound a bit weird? It's not actually. I'll give you a really simple example. Who can I pick on? Where's Simon Levo? Oh, he's with the kids upstairs? Great. He won't hear it then. So imagine you're coming into church and all the chairs are full apart from the middle row, and you're on your way to the middle row. You know how you've got to do that kind of thing where someone's got a water bottle down there, and you dance your way through the gap to where the chair's empty. Now, if in doing that you tread on someone's toe, you feel terrible, don't you? You feel terrible because you just trod on someone's toe, and they feel terrible because they've got a sore toe. But nobody would say something wrong has happened. There's no immorality going on here. It's just an accident. Just trod on someone's toe. But if I'm on my way to my seat and I think, I've got to go past Livo, And last week, his kids gave me lollies at the front door, but he nearly broke 3 ribs the way he hugged me. I need revenge, you know. But you miss. And all you've done is hurt what was already a dicky knee, if anyone can remember Hey Hey It's Saturday. Does anybody remember Hey Hey It's Saturday? Yes, good, thank you. The people who don't understand that, ask someone who just said yes to that question. So all I've done is jam my dicky knee. Livo doesn't have a sore toe. Nobody trod on anyone's toe. No bad thing happened, did it? But anyone watching, or Simon himself, or me when I get home and think, geez, that was a bit out of order, would say, yes, a bad thing has happened. Your motivation was to stamp on his toe. Motivation matters. It really matters even when no bad thing has gone on. Does that make sense? So, imagine, I might get to a place in life and think, compared to 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago, I think I'm a bit better about some things. You know, I think I'm better than I used to be about generosity, for example. I'm a bit more willing to give, and I read that thing about give in such a way that even your best friend doesn't know, and I've been quiet about it, and I think that's a good thing. I think I've made a little bit of progress. Or I think I used to tell people I'd pray for them, but didn't actually do it usually. But nowadays when I tell people to pray for them, I start right there and then after I've said the sentence, and I do remember later on to pray for them as well, and I think that's good. I think I used to be jealous, but I'm not. I'm more content now. I don't think I worry about what other people have got and wish I had it for myself as much. I think that's good. And if that's true, that is good. That's great. And you should go to God and say, thank you. That's great. Celebrate that thing. But it's tiger country, because it's not very far from that very sensible and thinking to going, yeah, and I'm not as bad as him. I know that much. He's terrible. And I'm not a gossip like her. Oh, can you imagine the stories I've heard about her? She is such a gossip. I'm willing to listen to the stories, of course, aren't I? Or even the dumbest one of all, he's got no humility. He is arrogant. Man, if he wants to learn about humility, he needs to come to me. I mean, I've got that sorted out. I'm really good at humility. I'm excellent. I think I'm probably the best person I know at being humble. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? It's good fun, but it's true. We start with easy comparisons of the bad guys on television and the terrible array of international leaders we have at the moment on planet Earth, and we feel superior to them. And it's not too far to tiger country of arrogance and pride and silliness. So it doesn't come as such a big surprise that when we turn to the third of these 3 chapters of the Sermon on the Mount, we read the statement, do not judge others. That's how the Bible reading opened today. It says in the second verse, God will use whatever system you use to judge others, God will use that system to judge you. 10 verses later, in the last verse of what we're looking at this morning, verse 12, it talks about treating others the way you would like to be treated. So judge others the way you would like to be judged. How would I like to be judged? Well, fairly. I don't want any lies told. I'd rather it be honest. But I also would hope that you give me some slack, and that when you point out to me the thing I've done wrong or the chance I missed to do the right thing, that you also remember I was tired or stressed or sad, that I'm a human, that I have weaknesses. I do a lot of talking, but I don't do as much walking as I do talking, and that I really hope to be better. And then Jesus goes into this fantastic, vivid imagery. I don't think you could call it a parable or even a comparison. It's just this really kind of strange exaggeration teaching. So why then do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the log in your own eye? How dare you say to your brother, please let me take that speck out of your eye when you have this log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. We need self-awareness, all of us, all the time, especially in human interaction. It's good to know what our strengths are, and if there's things that you do better now than you did 2 years ago and 5 years ago, that's great and to be celebrated. But we also need to know the other side of the story about our weaknesses and our blind spots and the things that we struggle with. I might be not a very anxious person, or I make myself look like I'm not a very anxious person. And so I don't worry about what I'm going to eat today and where tomorrow, etc. But what does need addressing in my life? And I should have a good look inside and say, is it my laziness? Is it my cynicism? Is it my short fuse? Is it when I reverse that simple instruction in the book of James, be quick to listen and slow to speak, but I'm quick to speak and slow to listen? How can I address this? I think it takes a lot of wisdom to know those things about yourself and to deal with them in yourself and in the people that you live with and work with and have fellowship with. I think one of the saddest aspects of church history is that a lot of churches came into existence not because someone went where there was no church and said, let's start a church, but because a church within itself had some kind of argument over some kind of theology or whatever, and they ended up saying, I can't go to church with you guys anymore, I'm going to start my own church. Or you guys can't meet with us anymore, you're not good enough, you need to go somewhere else now. And that's the way some churches came into existence. And I often think, that's a luxury of being in a big town with lots of choices and stuff, or being 2,000 years after the church began and there's all these different flavours across the world. But, if you're in a shipwreck and there's 100 people and you've survived on an island by yourself and only 5 people are Christian, what are you going to do? I'm not meeting with him, he's a Russian Orthodox. I'm not meeting with her, she's Catholic or whatever. Of course you wouldn't. You'd go, there's 4 other Christians in this, survival thing. That's great. Let's get together and talk about Jesus. At least we can agree on that. Now, we're working through all the verses, so they'll all be on the screen for you. The next verse is, do not give what is holy to dogs. They will only turn and attack you. Do not throw pearls in front of pigs. They will only trample them underfoot. Now, I would put this statement, verse 6, into the cryptic category for me personally in the Sermon on the Mount. This is not something where I immediately thought, oh, yes, that makes sense. Next verse, please. And I have to say, I'm relying heavily on what the traditional view, I suppose, of this is, but I'm open, as Grant has said in some of his talks, there may be other ways to understand this. But I'm going to begin it by a quick anecdote, a true story. True story. I was once a young man. See, it's already hard to believe, isn't it? But I was once a young man, and I was backpacking and I was overseas and I didn't have much money. But somebody scored a job for me painting a flat. Now, this flat was big by my standards, several bathrooms, many bedrooms, huge kitchen, huge dining room, an enormous study. Every single window and the front door was alarmed. And this is the early 1980s, so it wasn't very sophisticated stuff. So every now and again I would forget and open a window and but I was allowed to live there because it was empty while I painted. And on the first day, the person employing me said, here's your rollers and your brushes and some buckets and some stuff. And I said, where are the drop sheets? And they said, we haven't got any drop sheets, but over there, the guy who owns the flat, he's an oil magnate, or I'm not quite sure what magnate means in that context, but he's a rich oil guy. And he doesn't need those maps anymore. You can use the maps as your drop sheets. So this guy had 100 plus maps that were rolled up in special containers. When you unrolled them, they were about this big. And they're all of Saudi Arabia and other places where there's oil and apparently not needed anymore. And, I felt a bit bad about these precious things being used for such a silly job, but, that's what I did. But they were very awkward, you'd put them out and then they'd shut themselves again straight away. And, I'd put them out upside down and then put a bit of furniture on them, but then I'd have to walk around the furniture and, and then I got some tape and I taped some bits together. And it was all very slow and annoying. But in the study, there was this absolutely enormous desk, like you could have used it for a dining table for 8 people, and an even bigger rug on the floor. So I got the rug and I turned it upside down and I put it on the desk. So at least that one bit of the ceiling was pretty easy because I could stand on the desk and paint the ceiling. Every afternoon, the person employing me would turn up for 10 minutes, have a quick look around at what I'd done and give me the next instructions, etc., and say whether it was good enough quality. Well, she walked into the study and she grabbed the rug, didn't say a word, ripped it off the desk, walked it into the corridor and rolled it up very carefully and said, "That's a Persian rug. It costs £10,000. That's not a drop sheet." Okay. I didn't know. I didn't know it was valuable. It just looked like a rug to me. I grew up in a family where there was no such thing as Persian rugs. So what's that got to do with this strange verse? Dogs and pigs don't know what's valuable in human terms. Pigs can't be expected to know that a pearl is actually really, really valuable. They'll just run over it and say, "Why didn't you give me a potato?" if they could speak. And so that's the most common traditional interpretation of these statements, is that there are some people who are in a position not to be able to hear any serious talk about God or any serious talk about their own specs or their own logs. They're not in a position to hear. And in fact, if you badger them, they will arc up and trample you underfoot. And so often it's been interpreted that way, and that silence in some ways with these people is a statement in itself, and that arguing with someone in that position who will end up being angrier, it's okay to stop and let it be and come back another day. Another way to think about this is that Jesus was very harsh in his statements about the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, the leaders in the temple and stuff. Very harsh in his statements to them. He always accused them of missing the point, of being hypocritical, of being after glory and admiration, and especially got angry when they hid God from ordinary people or they sold God in the marketplace out the front of the temple. And Jesus was really angry about those things. And those people eventually did trample Jesus underfoot. And so maybe these statements are especially targeted to them. So what do you call someone who has a speck in their eye and they're not willing to have it dealt with? You could call them stubborn, I suppose, or Specsavers. That didn't work, did it? Okay. So today's message is brought to you by Aldi and Specsavers. We thank Nathan for introducing us to the idea of the kingdom of God being good, different. And we thank a failed joke for Specsavers. The next verse. Ask and you will receive, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks will receive, and anyone who seeks will find, and the door will be open to him who knocks. I wouldn't call this cryptic, but I do have some question marks over it. I don't think it's as easy as some other statements of Jesus, because it makes God sound like some kind of cosmic vending machine. All you got to do is ask, and out will pop whatever. You will receive something. All you got to do is seek and you'll find. All you got to do is knock and the door will be opened. Now, if I was a 6-year-old follower of Jesus, I would ask, dear God, please, at 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch and dinner, can you turn my food into ice cream? And I know some adults would probably ask that as well. Or, I'm an adult Christian in a Western world. Dear God, on a Monday night at about 6 o'clock every week, could you make sure that $10,000 appears in, well, either my bank account or my super? I don't mind. I'm not being fussy, bank account or super would do, but 10,000 every Monday night at 7 o'clock. Ask and you will receive. It says it here. Jesus said it. Obviously not true, is it? But we are told to ask. This isn't the only place. We're repeatedly told by Jesus to ask. Some of the parables that Jesus tells, like the hero of the parable is the person who pestered their neighbour until eventually they got out of bed. Ask and ask and ask until you get your neighbour out of bed. Back in chapter 6, the chapter before this, the Lord's Prayer, we ask for our daily bread. We ask for forgiveness. We ask for exemption from temptation. We ask for the kingdom to come. We ask, we ask, we ask. And Jesus even said, just before that, God knows exactly what you need before you ask for it. So even though God knows exactly what we need, we're still told, ask. That's the way it works. Verses 7 and 8, these verses don't say what you will receive. They don't say what's on the other side of the door. They don't say what you might find if you seek. But then it goes on and gives us some hints what we might receive. The next verses, would any of you who are fathers give your son a stone when he asks for bread? Would you give him a snake when he asks for fish? As bad as you are, you know how to give good things to your children. How much more then will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? So this is, what's the Aldi phrase again? Good different. This is good different you're going to receive. Our society's good is more cash, look prettier, more popular, more toys, more gloss, more chrome, more admiration. That's what our society thinks is good. God's standards are not so low. God's standards are much higher than that. God's good is very good. It's good different to our society, but it's much better. One of the things we're going to need, if we take the business of self-examination and trying to deal with our own log and then trying to deal with someone else's spec and dealing with people who are going to arc up if they hear too much from you, is wisdom. In the first few verses of the book of James, it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, ask God for wisdom, who gives generously and graciously. So one of the things we should ask and receive for this story especially is wisdom. Thanks for listening. We're getting close to the end. This is the final verse in the section we're dealing with this morning. Do for others what you want them to do for you. This is the meaning of the law of Moses and the teaching of the prophets. This is not cryptic. This is very straightforward. This is teaching at its simplest and most powerful and direct, and it's one of the hardest things to do. Easy to understand, hard to do. It's not a new idea, and Jesus is saying this is not a new idea. This is the meaning of the law of Moses and the teaching of the prophets. The law of Moses is already well more than 1,000 years old by the time Jesus says this statement. The prophets are 1,000 to 300 years old by the time Jesus says this statement. This approach to life is not new. It's not even unique to Christianity. Most major religions and moral codes have this kind of thing buried in it, and that's why it's called the Golden Rule. It's kind of universal. But often it's expressed in other places in a negative kind of way. So they would say, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Okay, don't do to others. There's lots of don'ts. Let's figure this out. Don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Well, I don't want anyone to murder me, so the rule must be don't murder. That's pretty good. I'm not really into murder myself. I haven't been accused of that. I haven't done many of those. I think that's okay. I don't want people to lie to me, so don't lie. Okay, well, I'm mostly tell the truth. Okay, so I don't want people to lie to me, so I shouldn't lie, and apart from the tax office. I personally think we should all pay our taxes. Jesus said it that way. I don't want people to steal my stuff, so don't steal. That's pretty good. I'm not really into stealing. That's pretty easy. All this stuff's pretty easy, isn't it? It is. Well, the don'ts are a relatively low bar. Avoiding doing the don'ts is not all that hard. Doing the do's is a whole lot harder. How would I like to be treated? I'd like to be taken seriously. I'd like to be listened to. I'd like to be fed if I can't do it myself. I'd like someone to party with if there's a celebration and some great news. I'd like someone to have a cry with me if life's been awful and there's a tragedy and I just can't even get to sleep. I'm crying so much. It'd be great for someone to sit with me then and maybe cry with me too. That's a high bar. But that's the bar that Jesus called us to. I want to come back to motivation to finish. Why do we talk this talk? And why do we do our best to walk this walk, given what we've heard this morning? What is our motivation? And if you are new to Christianity, you could be forgiven for thinking our motivation is we are scared of God. We are worried what God will say about us. We are worried what will happen to us after we die, and we have to account for our actions. And I can speak for myself, and I'm sure for many people who are regular at this church, and say that is not true. I am not scared of God. I am not scared of what will happen to me when I die. Jesus' death and resurrection means that's been sorted out. And I'll do my best and keep failing for the rest of my life, and I'll still be one of Jesus' little brothers. I'll still be a son or a daughter of God. It's been sorted out. It's not dependent on our performance. It's dependent on Jesus' performance, and it's signed and sealed and finished with. We are not afraid, but we do want to be better. We want to be followers of Jesus and be better followers of Jesus as every year goes past. And so that's what drives us on. We're not designed for 3 meals a day of ice cream. We're not designed for money without effort. We're not designed for these cheap things that we could aim for. We're designed to be God's kids and be part of the great story of building God's kingdom. And that's why we spend so much time reading the Sermon on the Mount and the other messages of Jesus and thinking about our lives and doing the best with what we've been given. And what a privilege that is. Thanks for listening.